Alright, hello guys, and welcome back to this series of faction breakdowns. And today we have got, by your own request, we have got ourselves Macedon. In the last video I asked, if you have a faction you'd like to see next, put it in the comments. And the one that we saw the most was Macedon, so that is going to be this video. If you guys have a faction you would like to see in the next one, remember, go down to the comment section and comment on who you'd like to see. It's just a good way for us to figure out what people would like to see next, and it gives you guys a little bit of a say on how we do it. And this time, once again, joining me is none other than Corby. So everybody, give Corby a huge hello. Hey Corby, how we doing?
Doing all right, man. How you doing today?
You know what? I'm just ready to do another faction here.
Round two.
Yeah, round two. We did Rome last time. It was interesting. I think Rome, like we said in that, it's a little boring. So today we're moving by demand of the people into Macedon. What are your thoughts?
Greek factions, not my favorite personally. I know a lot of people really love these guys. I hope you like spears, guys.
It is true. It is true. So what are your, when you think Macedon, just what's your immediate thoughts?
I'm thinking we're bringing hoplites, we're bringing pikes, we got some okay archers. Not a bad faction. They're pretty versatile. I wish they had a little bit more of some things and a little bit less of other things.
I would agree with that. It's kind of interesting, I think people will find that it's a very similar faction to a lot of the other Greek or Hellenic factions. Are you historically, are you a Macedon fan? Are you a Alexander the Great guy, or?
I like hearing the stories, but if I'm being totally honest, I don't know too much about that part of history.
Oh, shameful. What is going on? So, I guess, I think the easy way to put it is, you have Macedon, which was, Alexander the Great's kingdom, and then you have what's called the Successor Kingdoms, which are your Ptolemaic Egypt, Epirus, Seleucid, Bactria, I believe technically is a Successor Kingdom. They are all the pieces of Alexander the Great's empire that broke away when he died, right? So typically a lot of those factions are a little more versatile because they tend to be a more advanced version of Macedon, right?
Sure.
Not really. I mean, if you think about it, Seleucid is very similar to Macedon, but has more than Macedon does. But I think that's, in the end, what Macedon is honestly just a less good Seleucid, wouldn't you say on that?
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree on that one, but I don't know, maybe Epirus? We maybe disagree on who's better between the two.
Epirus, me personally, I'm not a huge fan of him. I don't like hodgepodge armies, but Macedon, I think the toughest part about Macedon is it's very high-end, wouldn't you say? Like, it's a Mercedes. It's like, you gotta have money for this faction.
Yeah, they definitely do a lot better on ultra funds and low funds, that's for sure.
I think it's, when looking at the roster here, the thing that you just don't see much of is low fund options, right? Especially in that melee infantry category, the lowest thing they have is a mercenary Thracian Warrior at 500.
And that's not a unit that I'd want to bring too many. Luckily for me, you can only bring 3.
You can only bring 3. And then even in their spear infantry, you've got your Militia Hoplite at 300, but that's their cheapest melee infantry, is the Militia Hoplite, and they are not fantastic, I would say.
Yeah, that's a true statement.
Yeah, I think I agree with you with, they are definitely a faction that does far better with more money, because you do have your Royal Peltasts. What do you think of Royal Peltasts?
Oh, Royal Peltasts, you're looking at top of the line. I personally love them. I use them a lot. I love their melee attack. They have the extra 2 Pila, so they have the 4 opposed to the 2, which I mean, if you know me, I'm a huge fan of the Pila. Anything with all the extras, it's made for me. It's just a great unit. It has some extra abilities. Use the whip is great. The what's it called? Encourage is a great feature.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'd ever use shield wall on a Royal Peltas, but it's there if you wanted it.
Right. You know, it's one of my favorite units. I'm a huge fan of them. Once again, another unit. That's one of those units that you see in Macedon, but then you see it spread through some of the more, some more of the Hellenic factions, like Seleucid's got them, Egypt has them, Epirus has them. You know, it's just a very good unit. I'm with you. I honestly think that javelins in this game are hugely important. Having that ability to deal a blow before you even get in combat is fantastic, especially with these guys because they have a controllable precursor. You know, you can control where that javelin goes, while you look at the thorax, and the thorax cannot. You just put them on fire will, and they throw at whatever the hell they throw at, right?
Yeah, I mean it's the Royal Peltas and the Thracian Spears for the Macedon, I believe, are the two.
Yep. I honestly think like a Royal Peltas to me is a thorax sword and a thorough spear. Had a baby, that's what you get. You know what I mean? But you're right, that melee attack is just outrageous. 62 melee attack on him. Just very good.
Not too great on armor piercing. Only 6 damage. That's about the same as a spear. But I'll take it. I'll take it.
And then, you know, next to them, like, you know, you got your thorax sword, which is, I mean, we've talked about it before. The thorax sword, it's your baseline. It is the baseline medium infantry. You know, medium tier infantry. Like, it just, it does what it does. It's there. It's decently priced. You know what I mean? But then, beyond that, you just get down to the Thracian Warrior at 500, and that's it. You have nothing cheaper than that. So, it just, I find that it makes it very hard to just grow a, you know, to make a full army out of Macedon. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, they're definitely, I wouldn't use them as the main front on attack. Definitely use them as a supporting army, a little bit here, a little bit there. They're wanting for a light sword. That would be really great. A Celtic warrior, maybe. I don't know what you'd give them, but something to really fill that gap.
Now, if we were going to highlight some special things, like, you know, this is Macedon gets this, what are we looking at?
Well, if we want to start up at the top of the generals, I guess the first unit we'd want to talk about is the Foot Companions. I believe completely unique to Macedon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. The Successor Kingdoms have their own kind of versions, but the Foot Companion is only for Macedon. What's that?
I was going to say, I wish we had it in front of us. We could just compare what stats were exactly different from the Foot Companions than, say, the Hellenic Royal Guard.
Why don't you just switch to Seleucid?
Seleucid's okay. Is it Seleucid or Seleucid?
You know what? I actually have no idea, and honestly, I guarantee we're all saying it wrong anyways. I have a feeling that that's not how you say it at all. Either one of them. So, I mean, looking at the Foot Companions, I think the biggest thing that stands out for them is that melee attack at 49. I believe the Silver Shield's only 42? Or 40?
Yeah, 44. But still, that's in a straight pike-to-pike battle, once you have two units coming straight at each other, for pikes that is, both at full health, where you're really, the big difference that you're going to make is that melee attack. Whoever hits who first, these pikes are going to get kills no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Foot Companions, for a lot of these other royal pikes, will literally walk through them. It's insane. You've never seen a pike die so quickly.
Yeah. And they're only 1220, so they're cheaper than the Silver Shields. They're cheaper than a Hellenic Royal Guard. You know, they're very similar stats-wise, if I remember correctly. You know, even that melee attack isn't hugely different, but it is a pretty decent chunk, you know. Weapon damage for them is only 28, not only 28, but it's 28. What's the Silver Shields?
The attack
Weapon damage.
Weapon damage 28. Yeah, that should be the same for all pikes.
I'm pretty sure most of these are the same. Melee defense is 43.
Yeah, 42.
Armor is 70. I think that's the big difference between the Silver Shield and the Foot Companion is the armor.
My armor is 100. Base value 70.
But I mean, that's where that because what's the price on the Silver Shield?
1280.
1280. I mean, it's a 60 gold difference. And I mean, I think you see it right there in the armor. Health of 60.
Yep.
And then base morale is 70.
The same.
So really, the biggest difference there, I think, between the two is just that armor. 30 armor is pretty substantial.
And the melee attack. I mean, that even 2 will make such a big difference because as soon as you lose, say, 5 pikes, you're now attacking 5 less times. It makes my damage rolls so much better than yours.
Right. Now, and then moving on, we've already talked about the Royal Peltasts. We kind of gave a pretty good idea of them. What about the Companion Cavalry?
I mean, once again, with these heavy cabs, similar to the elite pikes, you're going to have a lot of the same, big unit has big stats. But this is among the best, that toppest the top tier of shock cavalry. I mean, what's the charge bonus? 76?
Yeah, 76 on them.
Insane. Armor value is 70, which I believe is low if you compare it to, say, a cataphract. But if you look at it, that is 100% base value.
And I believe the biggest difference there is their horses are unarmored, while a cataphract's horse is armored. I believe that's where a big of that chunk of that armor comes from on the cataphract is the mount armor.
Have we ever talked about the difference between a base value of armor and a shield value of armor?
I don't think so. Why don't you explain it?
Okay, so there's a lot of these hidden stats, quote unquote. So armor is one of these stats that have a hidden stat. They have your base value stat. So armor 70 base value means no matter where you hit these units, melee, range, doesn't matter. They have a base armor value of 70. Mm-hmm. They have a shield value. Now this is unfortunately, well, actually very fortunate, because base value is much better than shield value. They have a shield value of 0. So if that shield,
so
they don't carry a shield. Yeah. If their shield value was, say, 20, that 20 shield would only apply while the unit is facing forward towards the direction of the attack. So if you attack them from the side or the rear, that value means nothing. So having 70 armor
base
is
value
great.
Is very good.
Base value is great. I mean, amazing. It's ideal. It's what you want.
Because it's all inclusive, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Gotcha. I mean, that 76 charge bonus by itself is pretty disgusting. I mean, that I feel, if I remember correctly, a lot of that very heavy shot cav has a 76, but I mean, that's good. It is very good. It's kind of like you said, when you get into these tiers, you see a lot of the similar things, but that doesn't make a stat bad. Just because you see it on other units doesn't mean it's a bad stat, right?
Exactly. And like a lot of these other factions that have these great horses, Armenia, you might have both high tier horses, which is great for both of you. But I mean, if we look at the infantry or the swords compared to Armenia, or swords, if we look at the infantry or the archers compared to Armenia, we're blowing them out of the water.
Right. And then finally, once again, something you can see in the general slot is the shield bearers. And I think this is one thing I do like about Macedon is the range of the units you can pick as a general. You're not stuck with only a cav or only an infantry or anything. You get a little bit of everything. You get a pike, you get a cav, you get a heavy infantry, you get a hoplite unit. What do you think of the shield bearers?
I personally like the shield bearers. They're very hard to kill if it's with arrows, with, charging into them. If it's, unless you're doing some seriously armor piercing damage, you're going to have a hard time killing them. They have 115 armor, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the highest armor value of any unit in the game.
If it's not, it's right up there. I don't think there's anything above it.
I think it's tied with Illyrian Noble, but I don't think anything breaks 115. So, top mark. More than happy to see that with the shield bearers. They have the encourage and discipline, which of course you always want with your elite units. They have the expert charge defense, which is something we should talk about, right? Because a lot of these factions, say barbarian factions, obviously the horse factions, what they count on is the ability to charge into you multiple times to really break you down, to weaken your unit, and not stay in melee long enough for you to get this damage in.
Right.
The shield bearer doesn't care for that. He'll trade with you with that any day. He'll probably even win that fight in the long run.
Yeah,
So
we saw it like straight up when we were doing some of our clips. Like that was it was pretty impressive. I think they killed like it was a naked sword charged in and lost 13 on the charge or something.
We should leave a pause right now and you just show that clip. And there it is. All right, now if you don't put it, that's going to make no sense.
It's fine. But yeah, and then like they're cheaper. You know what I mean? You're saving yourself about 100 gold. Just by if you brought a shield bearer or a general. So that's a little bit of money that you can spread out to other parts of your army.
I will say the one thing with the shield bearer is you don't have very many opportunities to use him, except for at the very, very end. He's very hard to use, opposed to, say, the Hippeus Lance, or I'm sorry, wrong faction, the Companion Cav, or the Royal Peltasts. Similar, the Foot Companion, you kind of have the same idea where it's hard to use. I personally use my pikes very aggressively, usually quite early in the game.
And Foot Companions are the perfect pike to use aggressively.
That's true. You're absolutely right, because the lower armor, they're much more susceptible to arrows. But they're definitely if you have a passive playstyle, you do very good with the shield bearer. If you have an aggressive playstyle, you perhaps want to look more at these Royal Peltasts. I would give those a recommendation for you.
Yeah, that's Royal Peltasts is by far one of my favorite units. It really is. And then, finally, as kind of like faction-specific units, they do have one more kind of faction-specific unit down in their melee cavalry category, and that's the Aspis Companion Cav. So it's basically just the melee version of the Companion Cavalry. Instead of having a huge charge bonus, it's got a very, very high melee attack.
I'm surprised that the Aspis Companion Cav doesn't have a bonus versus large. Because, most melee cav are anti-cav, really. So I'm really surprised.
But don't most melee cav carry a spear? Just
That's
a standard
true.
spear? The Aspis Companion goes into combat with a sword. But what is cool about the Aspis Companion, this is something you don't see a lot in a very heavy unit like this. They actually have javelins.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah, I believe, I could be wrong, but I think the only two heavy cavalry unit options like this that have javies are this unit here and the Thracian the Thracian Royal, right?
The Adrissian Cav?
Yeah, the Adrissian, the Royal Cavalry that they've got. That is also a melee cavalry that gets javelins, and it's a very good cav. So that is one cool thing. You see it more in like light horse, stuff like that will get javies. So you don't see that very often on a heavy cavalry like this one. It is expensive, 1,300 gold.
You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier about the Royal Peltas, how it has a whopping 62 melee attack. If people haven't been watching and seen, the melee attack of the Aspis is 68. That's insane.
Yeah, 68, and then a pretty solid weapon damage at 38.
I wonder how that compares.
A lot of times I find like a lot of times you either get one or the other. You know what I mean? You get a really good melee attack, but an okay weapon damage, or you get a really good weapon damage, but an okay melee attack. They've got a little bit of both, 105 health, too. 95 armor on them. What's their base value on their armor? Base value is 60, so 35 shield value on them. So like you said, it would be a little less all-inclusive on that armor.
It's still a really good melee cav. If your archers are standing still long enough to be shooting at these Aspis, they're probably already dead, right? So, I mean, there's really nothing you could want more from these Aspis Cav. They're a very heavy shot Cav. So, I mean, we've talked before about. I think we talked about charge bonus and how it applies, and it adds. Makes your melee attack and weapon damage better during a charge. But another thing that affects it is how heavy the unit is. So if you have a heavier unit charging into a lighter unit, it'll be more effective on a charge than, say, if we use the exact opposite, a light cav charging into a shield bearer. No, not a shield bearer. A thorax sword, which is a heavier class unit. Well, the shield bearer, I don't want to use as an example because they have the expert charge bonus, and that would be extremely bad for your light cav. But so if a light cav charges to a thorax sword, the thorax sword being a heavy unit, or I believe even very heavy, your light cav would get very few knockdowns, which takes away its ability to get these kills, and it also makes it take more damage in return quicker.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's a good unit. It does fall into that same issue that we were just discussing with Macedon, and that is money. You know what I mean? It's not often you're going to be able to afford to bring that cavalry with you. You know what I mean? That's a tough one to justify, spending that much money on that cavalry.
On ultra funds, I would definitely bring them. However,
absolutely.
We should talk about why we keep saying they're too expensive. Quick. So, for anybody who doesn't know this, when we make our army compositions, we're following a certain set of rules. That might not be true for your games. So, what we're considering as a base set of rules right now is that we can bring a maximum of 1 artillery on attack or defense. You can bring a maximum of 2 pike units. You can bring a maximum of 4 skirmishers, and that's along any category: missile cavalry and missile infantry, not including units like Royal Peltasts and Thuros spears, who have the extra pila. And then we're playing on large funds always.
Usually, yep.
Well, for this set.
Yeah, yep.
So when we say something's too expensive, we're not assuming that you're playing on ultra funds or even greater than ultra funds, and you can bring whatever you want. We're assuming on a large fund, which is, we might say something's not a great unit, but if you're playing on small funds or ultra funds, you might find greater or less success with that unit.
Right. So, I mean, I've got a defender army up right now, and I was able to get myself up to 17 units on this one, which I tend to find hard to do, especially as a defender on large funds, because you lose, what is it, 1,000 gold or something off of the attackers? Or
yeah.
I think it's 1,000 gold, and so getting more than 15 to 16 units is really tough with Macedon, because typically at that point the units you're bringing are pretty cheap and not typically very good. Like, you can bring as many Militia Hoplites as you want. That doesn't mean they're going to become a good unit.
No, I totally agree.
So for me, like for this army, once again, we are on large funds. We are defenders, so we have that penalty of money. I've got myself up to 17 units, and I'm bringing a Royal Peltast General. I actually brought 1 regular archer and 3 Cretans, and the reason I did the regular archer is honestly just because of the money. Not because I wanted a 4th archer specifically, but basically because I wanted to save a little bit of money. I could probably even adjust that to something else with some of my leftover funds if I wanted to. Then I brought 2 Thracian Warriors. Thracian Warriors are very, very hit or miss. They're very situational. It's something with a very high charge bonus at 36, good melee attack, good weapon damage, but very low melee defense and very low armor, so it's very situational when you can use them. Now, I find on defense, they tend to be a little more easy to use, because you have a lot more situations where you can kind of just throw them into a place where you need them, while on attack, you kind of need them to get you in the city, and that's tough with a Thracian Warrior with that low armor. I brought a standard pike. The pike, I feel like, is going to be very situational depending on who you're playing against. If you know you've already won the pike battle, then why bring super pikes? Or, I mean, there is a debate to be made on that as well. But you could basically say that, like, they can't, if they're, let's say Arverni, they can't bring pikes anyways. So you don't need a super pike to beat their pike, Now, you could say I could bring a really good pike just because it's really good, but for this situation, I just brought a standard pike. I did bring one Militia Hoplite. It doesn't hurt to have a Hoplite unit. They're good to say, hey, I need something to go and plug this gap. Boom, go in, and they can do what they need to do for a certain amount of time. I was able to bring 4 thorax swords and 4 thorough spears. Now, I'm okay with bringing the thorough spears because it's a defender army, and the thorough spears, like you were talking, they get those extra javelins. So on defense, you can get a lot of situations to use those javelins very effectively.
I like that army. Let me ask. I wanted to ask you a question real quick. Looking at your army, when you imagine you're using this army, are you using it on a civilized or a barbarian settlement?
For this, I probably civilized. Some streets that I can hold, walls I can throw javies onto, things like that. I would say this would be much more of a civilized settlement effective army. That was a very confusing statement I just made, but you get it.
And another question because of user error. So I see your 2 thorax swords have an experience, but I see you have $220 left. Is that how much money do you actually have left?
50 gold.
50 gold. Okay, yeah. So I thought that was.
Yeah, I believe when you look at my army, I don't believe it shows you. The money it shows is the money that's been spent on level ups, if I remember correctly.
Apparently not.
So yeah, I spent it on that. So once again, if I wanted to, I could probably change that archer into something different. I could even maybe bring a slinger or a peltast, maybe, But once again, that's kind of a situation. I think that's depending on what you want to accomplish with that unit. That standard archer is going to get beat by just about everything.
Well, I wouldn't use that. I would definitely use that archer early, and then hope the enemy shoots at him once he's out of ammo.
Yeah, waste of money or waste of ammo.
Because he will lose to literally every other archer in the game, and most slingers.
But what'd you bring? I'm gonna switch over to you real quick.
So before we start, I want to say I was also picturing us in a civilized settlement. This is not what I would bring in a barbarian settlement. So I've brought the shield bearer general. Once again, very hard to kill. I brought the 2 archers. I want to win the archer fight where I can, but because I have the wall behind me, I'm not terribly worried about the archers. Instead, I brought the Rhodian slingers so I could shoot at any units on the wall. Macedon, unfortunately, doesn't have any light infantry to really put on the wall, or any light swords, like a Galatian swords, like we were talking earlier. I did bring 2 Militia Hoplites. These units I would use, I'd put them on the wall first. I would hold off any of those, the stairs to get down off the walls, and give my slingers as much time as I can to shoot at them. I got a hoplite too if I need to, if they're really spreading thin. Same as you, I brought the 4 thorax swords. We've talked about this earlier, very vanilla unit. Actually, we compare every unit that's infantry based off a thorax sword. You'll see that later. And then I brought the 3 thorax spears. Great unit. They have the extra pila, so thorax swords, they bring 2 pila. The thorax spearmen, they bring 4. You use those, you use your 4 pilas when you can, and you put that unit in front to hold. For my final line, I did bring the foot companions, which I don't. Yeah, you brought the regular pikemen.
Yep, they look very similar.
I was questioning this. I could have saved half, $600 or dinar or whatever the game calls it, gone for a cheaper unit, maybe brought an extra Thoreau spear. But there's something to be said about that foot companion. It has the discipline, it has the encourage. It's really great for that last stand. Or even, as I said, I like to use them aggressively as soon as somebody gets into the wall. But that's what I brought.
Yeah, I mean, actually, in reality, kind of in the end, very similar. A lot of similar units, about the same size. Biggest difference there is your range difference, and then the pikes, really. You know, you brought the 2 slingers instead of the 3 or 4 archers, I guess I should say, and then a much, much better pike. But outside of that, they're very similar unit. They're very similar armies. You know,
Let me ask you real quick before we move on. What general did you bring?
I brought a Royal Peltast, Jen. Yeah.
No, I mean, what general skill?
Oh, I brought the strategist, mostly for just because the Royal Peltast has the use the whip that makes it tired. I like to have that because man, you get one of these elite units, you get them rolling with battle rhythm, use the whip, second wind, battle rhythm, use the whip, second wind. Man, they just, whew. You know, and that's any high tier unit. That's Oathsworn, Royal Peltasts, Silver Shield Swordsman. You know, any of them can be very, very effective with that second wind.
I didn't bring a Royal Peltas with all those special abilities. I mean, I have Hoplite Wall, but it doesn't exhaust your unit.
Right.
I actually opted for a Warrior General, and that's because when I'm using these Rhodian Slingers on the wall, I want those units off. I want them gone. I want them. If I start seeing them turn red, I'm hitting them with fire arrows if I can. I'm hitting them with Warrior. I want them off the field.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, that's something that, like, as I've played the game more and more, it becomes a lot clearer, you know, just depending on the army that you've built or using, that's where you need to decide which general you're going to bring, especially in a team game. If you have a lot of elites on the field, then it helps to have multiple strategists on the field. But if you don't have a ton of elites, or if you have a player that's not bringing a ton of elites, you know, if you have a Galatian player, let's say, they don't have a unit that gets exhausted so fast because of abilities, so they're a great faction to bring something other than a strategist, because they don't need all of that second wind and all of that stuff. So, with the army you built, once, like you said, you don't have a lot of that stuff, so you don't need it as much. So definitely just very, very dependent on what you're bringing.
Would you ever bring a Commander General as Macedon?
I don't think they need it. You know what I mean? Because if you think about it, we were discussing this earlier. Most of Macedon's units have disciplined. Thorough spears, thorax swords, your shield bearers, your foot companions, royal peltasts. I believe, do the hoplites?
Yep, hoplites have discipline as well.
So, do they really need it? They don't really need that commander. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I 100% agree with that. Now, granted, discipline doesn't really line up with commander, because if your commander dies, the discipline is then taking effect.
True.
But I will say you do have a lot of units of courage. You do have generally high morale stats. I think commander here is a pretty poor choice, unless your allies are really insistent on bringing something and you think they need it. So if, say, they're bringing a barbarian faction that doesn't have it, you might, but I don't think you'd ever want to bring for yourself, that is.
I just don't think it's necessary, like you said. Now, what do you think attack-wise? Do you want to switch over to that?
Yeah, sure.
Back to I guess we got to switch to attack, don't we?
Right, let me load up my... So you went first last time. You want me to go first this time?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so last time I want to point out I had a $0 left.
Most important thing, everybody in the video, this is the key thing you need to take out of this. $0 left.
Now, you probably can't see it because they're all watching from your perspective, but with all of my experience given, selectively like this, I have 0 funds left.
Yep.
So I brought, for attackers, so this time I brought my commander as a foot companion, last time shield bearer. The idea there is I'm going to keep my commander relatively safe. I did bring, while we're talking about generals, I did bring a strategist this time. Not as many chances to use a commander. I can keep my general in the back, keep him safe. I can pull my units off the front, bring him back to him, use strategist, maybe use it on my... a lot of times you'll use strategist on like a ally's cavalry as it passes by to move to a different flank. This is a very common use for strategist. So I felt that was the best use for him. For attackers, Macedon, I would bring a ballista for sure. The ballista is maybe not necessarily used to destroy the walls, but they can definitely be used to get some kills. This is what, a 740 gold? Let me just
I
check
believe
that.
so.
730. Wow, saved $10.
Even cheaper, yeah.
These can get 200 kills sometimes, especially depending on the map. A lot of barbarian factions or maps, you have these small areas. These giant ballistas do really well. I did bring a citizen cav. It's a cheaper cav. It's very good against your enemy's cav movements. I wouldn't necessarily use it offensively, but to keep myself safe. I opted for no slingers this time. I brought the regular archers and 3 cretans. The archers, of course, have that arc that you don't see with the slingers. They can be used to attack over buildings, over
Quick
walls,
question.
regardless. Yes.
On the archers, with your the experience you bumped up, did it get you to 7 shots per minute?
That was the next thing I was going to mention. The Cretan archers. Fun fact, guys. If you have a regular Cretan archer with no experience, it has 6 shots per minute. Once you up it up 1 experience bar, it goes to 7 shots per minute.
It's really
Now,
good.
I assume that you're doing like 6.75 or something like that, and you're not actually just gaining 1 shot per minute. Like, it's not a static boost like that. I don't take any chances with it. I'm gonna give him experience anyways. I brought 1 Militia Hoplite. If I'm being 100% honest with you, it just made my fun 0. I had to bring it. It was the optimal way to do it.
It's not a bad unit to bring to move tortoises.
Yeah, you can tortoises, which we haven't talked about yet.
We'll get to that.
We'll get into that. But they're also good for like Rands. If somebody's bringing cav units, then you should bring more than 1, so you can use your hoplite and your citizen cav to really fend off your flank. It's good to have this 1 cheap unit. I wish we could have more, but can't really afford that. I brought the 5.
Macedon.
I'm sorry. Yeah, because it's Macedon on large funds. I did bring 6 thorax swords. Good sword infantry, able to bust through some units. Maybe not, maybe barbarian swords, but
It'll win some, it'll lose some.
Or it will at least take some people out with them.
Yep.
And then you have the Thracian spears. Once again, I love these Pila. I have 4 of them with the Thracian spears. Once they're gone, you've gotten kills without having to take any damage. You can throw them in square. You can hold off your flanks. They're just generally good, and they're cheap. 560. You're willing to risk a unit for.
Yeah, not bad at all.
So what did you bring, Ellington?
So I was able to get to 19 units on this. Obviously with, with attackers, you have that extra money that you can spend. So I've got a Royal Peltasts General. Typically, I actually bring I honestly usually bring Companion Cav for attack, just because it does help having that the mobility for the general. If you need a cavalry unit to secure yourself, like you were talking earlier, it helps to have at least 1 unit that is good, really good cavalry that can move around. But I did bring the Royal Peltasts just because, just in reality, it's infantry. It's really good infantry to bring to the combat. I brought 1 Agrianian Axeman. I probably butchered that, but it's fine. 3 Cretan archers, 3 mercenary Thracians. The biggest reason I brought the 3 of them is because they are a slightly cheaper unit, and honestly, they can be useful. If used correctly, they can do some pretty good damage, especially depending on the opponent you're going against. If you're going against like a Boii or a Tylus, it helps to have a unit that has some armor piercing. I brought 2 Militia Hoplites. Honestly, really, for the exact reason that we were talking earlier. Something to move tortoises. If I have a thorax sword sitting on a tortoise, if any defender is going to be sitting there licking their chops, be like, that's a 710 unit that I'm going to kill 40 before it ever kills anything. You know what I mean? So Militia Hoplites, I'd much rather lose them to a defender's ballista. I brought a standard pike, and really the reason I only brought a standard pike for the attack is because using pikes on attack is a lot harder than using pikes on defense. So it's a lot harder, I feel, to get worth out of that unit. So it makes it really hard to justify spending a ton of money on a pike for attacking. Um, I'm not saying that you can't. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm just saying that it is a lot harder to use, so you really run the chance that you don't get the worth out of that unit. 5 thorax swords and 3 thorough spears. Same thing as you. I like having those jabbies from the thorough spears. They're really nice to have. Thorax swords, I kind of wish, I'd be really happy if I had one more thorax sword here. But once again, with Macedon, it's one of those things. My goal on this army is like, I want to get as close to 20 units as I can without having a terrible, terrible, terrible army.
No, I mean, I think I'd be more than happy with that army. I mean, the Thracian Warriors, I didn't bring any of them personally. They're expensive on the... I would rather have them on defense personally. I was going to say they're too susceptible to enemies shooting at them with whatever. Yep. On defense, I think. On attack, you can at least control the corridors and where you set them up a little bit better. I mean, I think we both brought very solid armies. I'd be happy with bringing either of these armies on attack or defense, really.
Yeah, this one here, like I said, it was the main goal with this army was to try and get as many units as I could out of it. And really the only way to do that was the Thracians. Like, that's the only option, really, to get a pretty solid amount of units without, bringing really terrible stuff. And there's, you could probably sacrifice, get down to 17 or 18, and it would allow for a little bit more thorax sword or something, a little smaller army, but you might have a little better frontline infantry out of it. Even just getting rid of those, bringing one more thorax and bring in another Militia Hoplite, even that right there puts you, that's 19, but a little more thorax. I don't know if you saw the change.
I see it. Now you only have $180 left. I can't see
how much know if I can. I've got 40 left. I don't think I've got enough. I guess there you go. Look at that, 0.
What a perfect army comp. You did it.
It did allow me to get one more Militia Hoplite, which means that's another unit to push a tortoise if I wanted to, or a ram, like you said. And then, speaking of the tortoises, that's, I think, one of the big bonuses that Macedon has is the tortoise. It's there's only a certain amount of factions that can bring them, and Macedon is one of them. So, especially in tournament settings, a lot of the really good factions that can bring tortoises get banned very quickly.
Or picked.
Yeah, exactly. Your Carthage, Seleucid is usually picked or gone first round of bans. So, Macedon is a good fallback, literally just for the fact that they can bring those tortoises, for your team. But yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much covers Macedon. What are your thoughts? Anything else? Like, what do you think of the faction as a whole here?
I wish we need to come up with a grading scale somewhere. I can say, hey, versatility, this unit A plus, very good. Offensive, not as good on the offense as it is on the defense, in my personal opinion. We like the thorax swords; they're good. The issue is you lack in a good low tier melee. So the issue is, those Militia Hoplites, you get them up on the walls, they take it down, or maybe they get up on the walls, then they really can't do too much on the attack. This is why we prefer like the Celtic Warriors, the Galatian Swords, Hastati, favorite unit in the game. On defense, however, you'll see those Militia Hoplites, they'll hold a choke point for a good couple minutes. On defense, time is the name of the game. You win absolutely after 60 minutes, right? I mean, most, especially tournament. So if you can hold them off for a couple minutes, you're more than happy.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I completely agree with it being a much better faction on defense. It just has a little more tools for that, that side of the game. I've attacked with it. Like when push comes to shove, you can do it. You can make it work. It's just you got to be a little choosy on who you attack against, which is hard. Sometimes you don't get that choice. Most of the time you don't get that choice. But, overall, like, I like the faction. Obviously, from historically, Alexander the Great is one of my favorite historical figures. Even Philip II, his father um, was a great commander as well. So I think that right there holds a little, gives it a little piece of my heart right there. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's a little basic, and I talked earlier. It's a little basic compared to some of the successor kingdoms, but that's the way it kind of should be because they came later. They had more advanced things than what than what Macedon itself had because it just had more experienced people. So, but yeah, I mean, overall, a solid faction. Um, who would you like to see next? I'm leaving it up to the people in the comment section. Like, what are your thoughts?
I would love to show you guys some of the barbarian factions specifically. Um, if we looked at my personal favorites, we'd be talking about Aravaki. I'm probably saying that wrong. Swaby. I think I'm saying that one right.
Yeah, there's some good barbarians out there.
Yeah, throw us a wild card. We should say, however, Ellington does not own. I can't name it. The pack, the nomadic tribe.
Tribes. Yep.
I doubt we'll ever do a Roxolani, Royal Scythia, or the other faction. I can't say the name. Masagati.
Yeah, Masagete, I think is what it's.
I love how I own it and I can't say it, but you probably got it right. So if you guys are gonna pick a faction, don't pick those three because we don't want to do them.
But and obviously, like, I think being the second video, I think people can really tell, like, we are judging these factions pretty primarily towards siege battles specifically. Some of the things we say can be carried over to a land battle, but majority of the stuff we're talking about are very specific to sieges. All these factions are completely different when it comes to a land battle. So that's something to keep in mind. Is I just know there's someone out there, but like, well, but if you think about it, Macedon's cavalry's really good, and it's like, well, yeah. So in a land battle that helps, but in a siege battle it's a little less. There's a lot more. There are a lot less situations for it. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that was good. I think we covered everything on this one, and yeah, thanks so much for joining me again, Corby.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, Ellington, I wanted to ask you a quick
up?
question. How much would somebody have to donate for you to do that voice for your entire next video?
All right, yeah, thing.
Yeah, just General Akbar.
$15.
Oh shoot! I'll give you $15 for that.
Do a whole replay video. Is that what you're talking?
No, the whole faction focus.
Oh, a whole faction focus. Whew. Well, man, that's a lot of pressure.
You said $15. It's too late.
All right, Corby. Well, we will see you for the next one. All right, buddy.
All right, have a good one.
All right, you too. All right, guys. Well, that is it for this one. Once again, don't forget to leave in the comment section who you guys would like to see next. For the Macedon one, we only had a couple people who commented it, but they're the ones who got it because they did. So if you have one you want to see, don't forget to leave the comment. But if you're new to the channel, thank you so much for joining. Don't forget to hit that subscriber button. We've got 32 or 33 more factions to go here. So we'll see you guys for the next one. And don't forget to hit the like button as well. So we will see you later.